Get on the ground now." The officer's scream shattered the quiet suburban evening. "I'm just trying to get my ID," the 17-year-old pleaded, his hands raised, fingers trembling in the harsh glare of the cruiser's spotlight. "I said get down." Before his knees could even bend, the sharp, violent crack of a taser deployed. 50,000 volts ripped through the teenager's body. As he collapsed to the concrete, gasping for air, Officer Derek Lang smirked, totally unaware that the boy twitching in the dirt was the only son of a deeply respected, heavily decorated, and notoriously ruthless U.S. Army Major General. The flickering amber glow of the street lamp at the corner of 4th and Elm cast long, shivering shadows across the damp concrete. It was a crisp November evening, the kind of night where the cold bit through thin fabric and made every exhaled breath look like pale smoke. 17-year-old Marcus Hale stood beneath the failing light, shifting his weight from one foot to the other to stave off the chill. He was dressed neatly, a navy blue blazer over a crisp white button-down, khaki slacks, and a burgundy tie that had been loosened just enough to allow him to breathe after a grueling 3-hour event. In his right hand, loosely gripped, was a silver trophy engraved with the words State Regional Debate Championship First Place. Beside him stood Paige and Morgan, his two best friends and debate teammates. Paige was practically vibrating with leftover adrenaline, her thick curly hair bouncing as she animatedly recounted the final round. Morgan, quieter and shivering in her thin cardigan, was scrolling through bus schedules on her phone. "I still can't believe you pulled the ad hominem card on the kids from Oak Ridge." Paige laughed, lightly shoving Marcus's shoulder. Their lead speaker looked like he was going to cry. "You dismantled his entire argument in 3 minutes?" Marcus smiled, a modest, easy expression that lit up his dark eyes. He left himself open. "You can't base a macroeconomic policy argument on purely anecdotal evidence. I just pointed out the structural flaws, that's all." "Oh, stop being so humble," Morgan chimed in, looking up from her screen. "You destroyed him, Marcus. Your dad is going to be so proud. Did you text him?" Marcus reached into the pocket of his slacks, his fingers brushing against the cold metal of his phone. "I called my mom. Dad's at some big strategy gala tonight at the Pentagon. Full dress uniform, the works. I didn't want to interrupt, but Mom said he's been checking his phone under the table all night, waiting for the results." A soft, affectionate smile touched Marcus's lips. Most people found his father, Major General Victor Hale, to be an intimidating force of nature. A man forged in the fires of 3 combat tours and decades of rigorous military discipline. But to Marcus, he was just Dad. The man who taught him how to tie a Windsor knot, who spent hours debating historical tactics with him at the dinner table, and who always, without fail, told him that his intellect was his greatest weapon. "Bus is delayed." Morgan sighed, breaking the moment. 6 more minutes." "Perfect," Paige groaned, hugging her arms around herself. "Just enough time for me to freeze into a solid block of ice?" 3 blocks away, crawling down the dimly lit avenue like a shark in dark water, was Car 44 of the Oak Creek Police Department. Behind the wheel sat Officer Derek Lang. Derek was 32, sporting a buzz cut, a jawline perpetually clenched around chewing gum, and a chip on his shoulder the size of a boulder. He was a man who thrived on the microscopic power his badge afforded him. Beside him, staring blankly out the passenger window, was Officer Cole Bennett, a 10-year veteran who had long ago traded his ideals for a quiet, pension-collecting existence. Cole hated riding with Derek. Derek was a live wire, always looking for a spark. "Dead night," Derek muttered, tapping his fingers aggressively against the steering wheel. "Nothing but noise, complaints, and stray dogs." "Be grateful," Cole replied mildly, taking a sip of lukewarm coffee. "Quiet is good. Quiet means we go home on time." "Quiet is boring," Derek shot back, his eyes scanning the sidewalks with predatory hunger. As the cruiser crested the hill, the sweeping headlights caught the trio standing at the bus stop. Derek's eyes immediately locked onto Marcus, a tall, athletic black teenager standing on a quiet, affluent suburban street corner late at night. Derek's grip on the steering wheel tightened. Well, what do we have here?" Cole sighed, leaning forward to squint through the windshield. "Looks like some high school kids waiting for the 42. They've got backpacks, Derek. Relax." "In this neighborhood, at this hour," Derek scoffed, a dark, cynical edge to his voice. Look at the way he's standing, looking around. He's casing those parked cars. He's looking down the street for the bus, Cole corrected, a note of warning creeping into his tone. Leave it alone, Lang. We're 10 minutes from shift change. But Derek was already accelerating. The cruiser's engine let out a low, menacing growl. I'm just doing my job, Cole, serving and protecting. We've had car break-ins reported in this sector 2 weeks ago, and it was a couple of junkies, Cole argued. But it was useless. When Derek got a target in his sights, logic evaporated. At the bus stop, Marcus's laughter died in his throat as the heavy cruiser violently swerved toward the curb, tires screeching against the asphalt. The vehicle stopped just inches from the sidewalk, and before the car was even fully in park, the blinding, high-intensity spotlight mounted on the driver's side clicked on. The beam hit Marcus directly in the face, washing out the world around him in a blinding white glare. Instinctively, he raised a hand to shield his eyes. Beside him, Paige and Morgan gasped, taking a step back. Marcus's heart gave a sudden, hard thump against his ribs. The cold night air suddenly felt thick and suffocating. The lessons his father had drilled into him since he was 12 years old flooded his mind, playing like a survival manual on a loop. Keep your hands visible. Do not make sudden movements. Speak clearly. Comply with orders. But remember your rights. You are a right. You do not cower, but you do not provoke. Marcus took a slow, deep breath, forcing his rising panic down. He lowered his hand from his eyes, ensuring both of his hands were empty, visible, and resting at his sides. He set his debate trophy carefully on the bench. The heavy thud of the cruiser door opening sounded like a gunshot in the quiet night. Heavy boots crunched onto the pavement. Officer Derek Lang stepped into the light, his hand resting casually yet terrifyingly on the butt of his sidearm. "Evening," Derek said, his voice dripping with forced mock politeness. "Good evening, officer," Marcus replied, his voice steady, modulated, and respectful. Derek stopped a few feet away, sizing the boy up. He didn't see the blazer or the trophy on the bench or the two terrified girls. He saw a stereotype. He saw an excuse to exert dominance. "What are you kids doing out here?" Derek demanded, his eyes narrowing. "We're waiting for the bus, sir," Marcus answered cleanly. "The 42. It's supposed to be here in a few minutes." Derek took a step closer, invading Marcus's personal space. The smell of stale coffee and peppermint gum hit Marcus's nose. "Is that right? And where are you coming from?" "Oak Ridge High School," Paige piped up, her voice trembling slightly. "We had a debate tournament." Derek snapped his gaze to Paige, pointing a thick, accusatory finger at her. "I didn't ask you, sweetheart. I asked him." Marcus immediately stepped slightly in front of Paige, a protective instinct taking over. "She's telling the truth, officer. We're just trying to get home." Derek's jaw clenched. He didn't like the way the boy looked at him. There was no fear in Marcus's eyes, only a calm, intelligent assessment. It infuriated Derek. He wanted deference. He wanted submission. "Step away from the girls," Derek ordered, his tone dropping an octave into something inherently dangerous. "Derek," Cole called out from the passenger side, having finally stepped out of the vehicle. "Let's just run their IDs and get out of here. They aren't doing anything." "I said step away," Derek barked, ignoring his partner. Marcus complied slowly, taking 2 measured steps to the right, isolating himself under the harsh spotlight. He could feel the eyes of the officer burning into him. He knew exactly what was happening. He had read the statistics. He had debated the systemic issues, but intellectualizing it was entirely different from feeling the cold, oppressive weight of a badge weaponized against him. "Let's see some identification," Derek demanded, hooking his thumbs into his utility belt. "Of course, officer," Marcus said smoothly. "My wallet is in the front pocket of my backpack." He gestured slightly with his chin toward the black North Face backpack slung over his right shoulder. "I'm going to take the backpack off slowly and get my ID." It was textbook compliance, clear communication of intent, slow movements. "Just get it," Derek snapped, impatient. Marcus slowly rolled his shoulder, letting the strap of the backpack slide down his arm. As he did, the heavy debate trophy resting on the bench caught the light. "What's in the bag?" Derek suddenly barked, his hand moving from his belt to rest directly on his taser. Marcus froze. "Just school books, sir, and my wallet." Paige, standing in the shadows, had seen enough. Her hands were shaking, but she reached into her pocket and pulled out her smartphone. The screen lit up her face as she opened the camera app and hit record. A small red dot appeared. Derek caught the movement out of the corner of his eye. He whipped his head toward Paige. "Put that phone away right now. That is an active police investigation." "I have the right to record you," Paige said, her voice wavering, but her grip on the phone tight. "We're in a public space." "I said put it away." Derek stepped toward Paige, his aggression mounting. "Officer, please." Marcus intervened, his voice rising slightly in volume to draw Derek's attention away from his friend. "She's not interfering. I'm getting my ID right now." Derek spun back to Marcus, his face flushed with sudden irrational rage. In Derek's twisted perception, Marcus's intervention was a challenge to his authority. "Don't you tell me how to do my job, boy." The word hung in the air. Boy. It wasn't just a descriptor. It was a weaponized slur loaded with centuries of historical degradation. Marcus's jaw tightened. The disrespect was palpable. A heavy, suffocating blanket thrown over the situation. "I'm not telling you how to do my job," Marcus maintained, keeping his voice painfully even, though his heart was now hammering a frantic rhythm against his sternum. "I'm trying to provide my identification as you requested. I'm reaching into my bag now." Marcus unzipped the small front compartment of his backpack. The zipper snagged slightly on the fabric. He gave it a gentle tug to free it. To anyone else, it was a normal movement. To Derek Lang, whose adrenaline was spiking and whose mind was clouded by prejudice and a desperate need for control, the sudden jerk of Marcus's arm was a threat. "Show me your hands," Derek screamed, the command contradictory to his previous order to produce the ID. Marcus, confused by the sudden conflicting demand, instinctively pulled his hand out of the bag to show it was empty. "My hands are." "He's got something," Derek yelled, though there was absolutely nothing in Marcus's hands. "Derek, no!" Cole shouted from the back of the cruiser, lunging forward. But it was too late. Derek unholstered his bright yellow taser with lightning speed, aimed it squarely at the center of Marcus's chest, and pulled the trigger. Pop! Crack! Two barbed darts shot through the freezing air, trailing thin copper wires. They pierced the thick fabric of Marcus's blazer and embedded themselves deep into the muscle of his chest and abdomen. Marcus didn't even have time to register the pain before the world exploded into white-hot agony. 50,000 volts of electricity surged through his nervous system, his muscles locked instantly in a violent, uncontrollable spasm. The breath was ripped from his lungs in a guttural, choked gasp. His legs gave out immediately. He tipped backward like a felled tree, his head striking the hard concrete of the sidewalk with a sickening thud. "Marcus!" Paige screamed, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror that tore through the quiet neighborhood. Morgan covered her mouth, sobbing hysterically, paralyzed by the violence unfolding in front of her. On the ground, Marcus was trapped in a nightmare. His body was not his own. The electricity rode his nerves like fire, seizing his back, his arms, his legs. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't speak. He could only twitch uncontrollably against the cold pavement, his eyes rolling back. "Stop resisting. Put your hands behind your back." Derek bellowed, standing over the convulsing teenager. He released the trigger, ending the first 5-second cycle. Marcus lay there gasping desperately for air, his brain struggling to reboot, his limbs feeling like they were made of lead. "Hands behind your back!" Derek screamed again, entirely ignoring the fact that the boy had just been electrocuted and was semi-conscious. Before Marcus could even process the command, Derek dropped a heavy knee squarely into the center of Marcus's spine, pinning him to the concrete. Marcus groaned, a weak, wet sound of pain. Derek grabbed Marcus's left arm, violently wrenching it backward. He grabbed the right, pulling it, with enough force to nearly dislocate the shoulder. The cold metal of handcuffs bit savagely into Marcus's wrists, ratcheted incredibly tight. "Derek, what the hell did you just do?" Cole yelled, finally reaching the scene. He looked down at the boy who was bleeding from a gash on the back of his head where he had hit the pavement. He made a sudden movement. He was reaching for something. Derek justified, panting slightly. An ugly, triumphant sneer on his face as he yanked Marcus up by the cuffs, forcing the groaning boy to his knees. "He was getting his ID, you idiot," Cole snapped, his face pale. He turned to the girls. Paige was still recording, tears streaming down her face, her hand shaking violently. "Are you okay?" Cole asked the boy, his voice dropping into a panic. Marcus couldn't answer. His chest felt like it had been crushed by a cinder block. His heart was beating in a terrifying, erratic flutter. Thump, 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 thump. A dangerous arrhythmia triggered by the electrical shock. "Get him in the back of the car," Derek ordered dismissively, wiping a speck of spit from his lip. "Call a bus to check him out, but he's going downtown for resisting and assaulting an officer." "Assaulting?" Cole stared at his partner in disbelief. "Derek, he didn't even touch you." "He threatened me with his posture. Now put him in the car before I write you up for insubordination." Cole, cowardly and compliant to the end, grabbed Marcus's shoulders and half-dragged, half-carried the barely conscious teenager toward the back of the cruiser. Derek turned back to the girls. "You two go home now, or I'll arrest you for interfering." Paige didn't lower her phone. She looked Derek dead in the eyes, her fear suddenly replaced by a cold, sharp anger. "You're going to jail," she whispered, her voice carrying over the idling engine of the police car. "You have no idea who you just did this to." Derek laughed, a harsh, abrasive sound. "Right, just another street punk. Go home, little girl." He turned and walked back to the cruiser, utterly confident in his immunity, completely blind to the fact that he had just signed his own professional and perhaps personal death warrant. The fluorescent lights of the 12th precinct buzzed with an irritating, relentless hum. The station smelled of floor wax, stale donuts, and cheap bleach. At his desk in the bullpen, Officer Derek Lang leaned back in his creaky rolling chair, his boots propped up on the edge of the desk. He was casually typing out his incident report using 2 fingers, occasionally pausing to take a bite of a powdered donut. Suspect became verbally aggressive, assumed a fighting stance, and reached aggressively into a concealed bag. Derek muttered to himself as he typed, completely fabricating the narrative to fit his use of force. It was a routine he had perfected over the years, sprinkling in words like aggressive, furtive movements and "feared for my life," the magic spell that made internal affairs look the other way. Across the room, Cole stood by the booking counter, staring blankly at the wall. His stomach was tied in a knot. The EMTs had taken one look at Marcus in the back of the cruiser, noted his erratic pulse and the head wound, and immediately diverted him to street. Jude's Memorial Hospital, rather than the precinct holding cell. Cole had to ride in the ambulance watching the quiet, polite teenager slip in and out of consciousness. Cole walked over to the evidence table where they had dumped the contents of Marcus's pockets and backpack. He wanted to verify the kid's ID for the arrest report. He unzipped the wallet. The first thing he saw was a standard state driver's license. Marcus Alexander Hale, age 17, no prior record. Cole sighed, guilt gnawing at his edges. Then his fingers brushed against a thicker, heavier card tucked behind the license. He pulled it out. It was an olive green United States Department of Defense identification card, a dependent card. Cole's eyes scanned the text. Sponsor: Hale, Victor A. Rank: Major General 08. Branch: USA, United States Army. Status: active duty. Cole stopped breathing. The blood completely drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse. His hands began to tremble so violently that he dropped the wallet onto the metal table with a loud clatter. "Major General," Cole whispered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. A 2-star general, the kind of man who commanded tens of thousands of troops, who had the ear of the Pentagon, who possessed a level of power and influence that local beat cops couldn't even fathom. "Hey, Cole, you get the kid's name?" Derek called out from his desk, oblivious to the catastrophe. "I gotta finish this report before the sergeant gets back." Cole slowly picked up the heavy military ID card. He walked over to Derek's desk, his footsteps heavy and dragging. He didn't say a word. He simply dropped the green card directly onto Derek's keyboard. Derek frowned, irritated. "What is this?" He picked it up, squinting at it. "Military brat." "So what? Doesn't mean he gets to act like a thug." "Look at the rank, Derek," Cole said, his voice a hollow, terrified rasp. Derek read it. "Major General." He scoffed, trying to mask the sudden cold spike of panic in his chest. "Probably a fake. Kids buy these online to get discounts at the movie theater. Besides, what's a general's kid doing waiting for a public bus?" "His debate trophy," Cole said, pointing to the silver cup resting on the evidence table. "Oak Ridge High School. It's an elite prep school, Derek. It costs $40,000 a year. We didn't arrest a street punk. You tased the honor roll son of a 2-star general for trying to show you his ID." Derek swallowed hard, the powdered donut suddenly feeling like sand in his throat, but his ego refused to back down. I followed protocol. It doesn't matter who his daddy is, he resisted. There's a video, Cole reminded him quietly. That girl recorded the whole thing. Silence descended on the desk, heavy and suffocating. 40 miles away at the heavily guarded Fort Marshall Army base, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to the grimy precinct. Inside the sprawling, elegant general's residence, the evening was quietly winding down. Major General Victor Hale stood in his study, pouring himself a small glass of scotch. He was a deeply imposing man in his early 50s, broad-shouldered, with closely cropped salt and pepper hair, eyes as cold and sharp as obsidian, and a face lined with the harsh realities of command. Even out of his dress uniform, wearing simple slacks and a sweater, he carried an aura of absolute authority. In the living room, his wife Serena, a brilliant, formidable woman who managed a nonprofit foundation, was curled up on the sofa, reading a brief. The harsh ring of the landline cut through the quiet classical music playing in the background. Serena picked it up. Hale Residence. Victor took a sip of his scotch, opening a dossier on his desk. 10 seconds later, he heard a sound that made his blood freeze. It was the sound of a porcelain teacup shattering against the hardwood floor. Victor moved instantly. He didn't walk. He moved with the swift, lethal grace of a soldier responding to an ambush. He found Serena standing by the phone, her face completely pale, one hand covering her mouth. "Serena, sit." "Now," Victor said, his voice low, commanding, stripping away the husband and replacing it with the general. "It's St. Jude's Hospital," she breathed, her voice shaking violently. "It's Marcus, the police, Victor. The police tased him. He hit his head. His heart is irregular. They've got him handcuffed to a bed." The silence that followed was absolute. Victor Hale did not yell. He did not throw things. The fury that ignited inside him was not a wildfire. It was a cold, calculated, tactical nuclear strike. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet, 10 degrees. "Which precinct?" Victor asked, his voice dead flat. "The 12th, Oak Creek." Victor turned on his heel. He didn't rush to the door. He walked calmly back to his study. He picked up his secure mobile phone and dialed a number he rarely used for personal matters. It rang once. "Kane," a sharp, feminine voice answered. Simone Kane was a former military prosecutor turned ruthless civil rights and defense attorney. She was a shark in a tailored suit, a woman who destroyed careers for a living and smiled while she did it. She was also the godmother to Marcus. "Simone, it's Victor." The tone of his voice communicated everything. The playfulness they usually shared was gone. "What happened, sir?" Simone asked, her tone instantly shifting to strictly business. "The Oak Creek Police Department just assaulted my son. They deployed a taser on him. He is currently at St. Jude's." Victor paused, his eyes narrowing, looking at his reflection in the dark window of his study. "They have him handcuffed to a hospital bed." He heard Simone inhale sharply over the line. "I'm in my car in 60 seconds. I will be at the hospital in 15 minutes. Nobody speaks to him. Nobody touches him." "Make sure of it," Victor said softly, a promise of devastation laced into the syllables. "And Simone." "Yes, General." "When you are done securing my son, find out the name of the officer who did this, because by tomorrow morning, I am going to salt the earth he walks on." "Consider it done, Victor," Simone said, and the line went dead. Victor hung up the phone. He looked at the family portrait on his desk, Marcus smiling brightly, holding a debate trophy from middle school. Victor reached out, his large, calloused thumb gently brushing over his son's face. The Oak Creek police thought they had taken down a nobody. They had no idea they had just declared war on a man who specialized in destroying armies. The sliding glass doors of St. Jude's Memorial Hospital parted with a soft pneumatic hiss, admitting a rush of freezing November air, and the terrifying force of nature that was Simone Kane. Simone did not walk. She marched. Her charcoal gray tailored suit acted as armor, her stilettos clicking against the polished linoleum floor with the rhythmic, lethal precision of a metronome counting down to an execution. She bypassed the triage desk entirely, flashing a heavy gold embossed Bar Association badge at a startled security guard before he could even open his mouth to protest. Emergency room bay 4, she demanded, her voice cutting through the chaotic hum of the hospital lobby like a scalpel. Ma'am, you can't go back there without— Watch me, Simone snapped, not breaking her stride. She found bay 4. At the end of a brightly lit corridor, standing guard outside the sliding glass door was a young, fresh-faced Oak Creek police officer who looked like he had barely graduated from the academy. He stood awkwardly, hands tucked into his tactical vest. Through the glass, Simone saw Marcus. The sight made her breath catch, momentarily piercing the cold, professional exterior she had spent decades perfecting. Marcus, the boy she had bought a first edition copy of The Art of War for his 10th birthday, looked shockingly small in the oversized hospital bed. He was wearing a thin paper gown. An IV line snaked into his left arm. A white gauze bandage was taped to the back of his head, stark against his dark skin. A heart monitor beeped rhythmically beside him, tracing an elevated, erratic rhythm. But what made Simone's vision swim with absolute, unadulterated fury was Marcus's right arm. It was pulled awkwardly to the side, a heavy steel handcuff securing his wrist to the metal bed rail. Simone shoved the glass door open. Hey, stop right there. Nobody is allowed in this room. It's a police— The rookie officer moved to block her path, his hand resting defensively on his belt. Simone stopped inches from him, tilting her head up to lock eyes with the young man. Her gaze was paralyzing. My name is Simone Kane. I am the senior partner at Kane, Vance & Associates, and I am the legal counsel for Marcus Hale. If you do not remove your hand from my path in the next 3 seconds, I will personally see to it that you are scrubbing toilets at the county jail for the rest of your miserable, truncated career. The rookie swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Ma'am, Officer Lang's orders were strict. The suspect is under arrest for assaulting a police officer and resisting. This is a minor, Simone interrupted, her voice dangerously quiet. A minor who has not been formally charged, who has not been processed, and who is currently under medical distress caused by excessive, unwarranted force. By chaining him to this bed, you are violating his 8th Amendment rights against cruel and unusual punishment, his 14th Amendment right to due process, and violating state statutes regarding the medical detention of a juvenile. You are actively participating in false imprisonment. The rookie blinked completely out of his depth. I'm just following orders. The Nuremberg defense won't save you, officer, Simone said coldly. Uncuff him now. I don't have the key, the rookie stammered, shrinking under her glare. Lang has them. Simone sneered, pulling her phone from her pocket. She marched past him into the room. Marcus slowly opened his eyes, wincing at the harsh overhead lights. His eyes were bloodshot, his face tight with pain, but a small, weak smile touched his lips when he saw her. Aunt Simone, he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. Don't speak, sweetheart. I'm here. Nobody is going to touch you, Simone said, her voice instantly softening as she placed a gentle hand on his uncuffed shoulder. She looked at the raw red welts on his wrist where the metal was biting into his skin. She turned back to the rookie, raising her phone to her ear. I'm calling the chief of staff of this hospital, and then I am calling the local FBI field office. If those cuffs are not off my client in 5 minutes, I am filing a federal civil rights lawsuit, and I will name you specifically as a co-conspirator. Find the key. The rookie practically tripped over himself, running down the hall to find a supervisor. Simone took a deep breath, composing herself. She looked down at Marcus, who was shivering slightly despite the blankets. Marcus, look at me, Simone said softly but firmly. I need to know exactly what happened. Don't leave anything out. Between shallow breaths and winces of pain, Marcus recounted the nightmare, the bus stop, the spotlight, the contradictory commands. He told her how he had explicitly announced he was reaching for his ID. He told her about the taser, the concrete, the knee in his back. Did they find your ID? Simone asked, her mind already calculating the tactical strikes she was going to lay down on the Oak Creek PD. Yes, Marcus whispered. They searched my bag. They saw my military dependent card. Simone froze, a slow, terrifying smile spread across her face, a smile that promised absolute ruin. They saw the card. They know who your father is, and they still left you chained to a bed. The officer, Derek Lang, Marcus said, coughing slightly. He didn't care. "Oh, he's going to care," Simone whispered, dialing Victor Hale's secure line. "He's going to care very, very much." In a quiet suburban bedroom across town, Paige sat cross-legged on her bed, her laptop open in front of her. The glow of the screen illuminated the tear tracks drying on her cheeks. Her hands were still trembling, not from cold, but from an intoxicating mixture of trauma and deep burning outrage. On her screen, paused at the 42-second mark, was the video she had recorded on her phone. She had watched it a dozen times. Every time the crack of the taser echoed through her laptop speakers, she flinched. She watched Marcus, brilliant, kind, rule-following Marcus, crumpled to the ground like discarded trash. She heard the officer's mocking tone. She saw the absolute lack of threat her friend had posed. He was just getting his ID, she thought, her teeth grinding together. He told him what he was doing. Her parents had told her to wait, to let the lawyers handle it, to trust the system. But Paige was on the debate team. She knew how the system worked. She knew that police reports could be falsified, body cams could mysteriously malfunction, and narratives could be twisted to turn victims into villains. Not this time. Paige opened a new tab. She logged into X, then TikTok, and finally a direct email portal for the largest local news syndicate in the state. She didn't write a long, emotional essay. She kept it clinical, factual, and devastating. Oak Creek PD officer Derek Lang tasing a 17-year-old unarmed high school student. The student was asked for his ID, announced he was reaching for it, and was tased in the chest. He was holding a debate trophy minutes prior. We need accountability. She attached the unedited, high-definition video. She tagged the local news stations, the Oak Creek mayor, the chief of police, and several prominent national civil rights organizations. She hovered her finger over the mouse pad, her heart hammered in her throat. Once this was out, there was no taking it back. She clicked post, then she hit send. For the first minutes, nothing happened. Just a few views, a couple of retweets from her high school friends. But the internet is a powder keg waiting for a match. The video was too clear, the injustice too blatant, the violence too visceral. At minute 15, a prominent civil rights journalist with 2 million followers, quote, tweeted the video with a single word: disgusting. By minute 30, the algorithm caught fire. The video hit 10,000 views, then 50,000. At the Oak Creek 12th Precinct, the atmosphere was a mix of boredom and stale coffee. Officer Derek Lang was sitting in the break room, recounting his version of the arrest to a couple of night shift officers. "Kid was acting sketchy, tensed up, reached into the bag fast," Derek said, mimicking a sudden jerking motion, completely rewriting history in his own mind. "You hesitate out there. You don't come home. Better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6, right?" The other officers nodded, a silent, fraternal agreement that protected their own. Suddenly, the break room door flew open with such force that the doorknob punched a hole in the drywall. Captain Thorpe stood in the doorway. His face was the color of a bruised plum, the veins in his neck bulging against his uniform collar. The room went dead silent. "Lang!" Captain Thorpe growled, his voice vibrating with a terrifying rage. "My office right now." Derek's cocky smile faltered, but his ego kept him insulated. "Sure thing, Cap. Just finishing up my shift report on that resisting arrest." "Shut your mouth and get in my office," Thorpe roared, the sound echoing through the entire precinct. Derek stood up, his stomach doing a nervous flip, and followed the captain out of the break room. When he walked into Thorpe's office, he noticed the precinct's switchboard outside was suddenly lighting up like a Christmas tree. Phones were ringing incessantly. Thorpe slammed his office door shut and pointed a trembling finger at the large monitor on his desk. "Explain this to me, Lang. Explain to me how a kid complying with your order to get an ID is a lethal threat." Derek rounded the desk. On the screen, playing on an endless loop on a national news website, was Paige's video. Derek felt all the blood rush out of his head. His knees went weak. The video was shot from the perfect angle. It clearly picked up Marcus's calm voice. "I'm trying to provide my identification as you requested. I am reaching into my bag now." It showed Marcus's slow, deliberate movements. It showed his empty hands, and it showed Derek screaming contradictory commands before violently deploying his weapon. That angle doesn't show the whole story," Derek stammered, a cold sweat breaking out on the back of his neck. He was non-compliant. The body cam will show. I just pulled your body cam footage, you absolute imbecile, Thorpe shouted, slamming his fists onto the desk. It perfectly matches the girl's video. You tased an unarmed minor who was complying with your orders, and then you charged him with assault. He's a thug, Cap. He was mouthing off, Derek argued desperately, falling back on his usual tired defenses. He's an honor student, Thorpe screamed, his spit flying across the desk. And that's not even the worst part. The mayor just called me. The governor's office just called the mayor. Thorpe took a step closer to Derek, dropping his voice to a venomous whisper. Do you have any idea whose son you almost killed tonight, Lang? Derek swallowed hard, remembering the olive green ID card Cole had dropped on his desk, the card he had dismissed as a fake. Major General, his father is Victor Hale, Thorpe said, the name hanging in the air like a death sentence. Major General Victor Hale? The man commands a division of the United States Army. He sits on joint task forces at the Pentagon, and he is currently on his way to this precinct. Derek's jaw dropped. The reality of the situation finally crashed through his armor of ignorance and prejudice. He hadn't just crossed a line, he had stepped on a landmine. Cap, you got to help me, Derek pleaded, his voice cracking. The Union. The Union won't touch this with a 10-foot pole, Thorpe sneered, stepping back in disgust. Hand over your badge and your weapon, Lang. You are suspended pending an internal investigation. But honestly, that's the least of your worries because the general is bringing the feds with him. The 12th precinct of Oak Creek was rapidly devolving into a state of absolute panic. It was late at night, but the building was buzzing like a disturbed hornet's nest. Outside, the wail of sirens could be heard as neighboring precincts sent units for crowd control. Thanks to Page's video, a spontaneous protest of over 300 people had already amassed on the precinct lawn, holding up cell phone flashlights and chanting Marcus's name. Inside, officers were scrambling. The local police chief had been dragged out of bed and was pacing the bullpen in his pajamas and a hastily thrown-on trench coat, screaming at dispatchers. But all the chaos, all the shouting, and all the ringing phones came to a dead, horrifying halt at exactly that moment. Through the heavy double doors of the precinct strode Major General Victor Hale. He was no longer wearing the casual sweater from his study. He had changed. He was in his Class A Army service uniform. The dark blue fabric was immaculate, adorned with rows of colorful ribbons denoting decades of combat deployments, acts of valor, and unyielding service. 2 silver stars gleamed blindingly on his epaulets. His face was a mask of cold, chiseled granite. He did not come alone. Flanking him were 2 heavily armed military police officers, but far more terrifying to the local cops were the 4 men in dark windbreakers walking a step behind the general. The bright yellow letters across their backs read, FBI. The bullpen fell dead silent. Cops froze mid-step. The ringing phones seemed to muffle themselves in the presence of the sheer suffocating gravity the general projected. Victor Hale walked past the booking desk without glancing at the sergeant. He walked directly toward the glass-walled office of Captain Thorpe. The crowd of panicked officers parted for him like the Red Sea. Derek Lang, who had been stripped of his gun and badge and was sitting miserably on a bench waiting for his Union rep, looked up. When he saw the general, a jolt of primal terror shot down his spine. He tried to look away, but he couldn't. Captain Thorpe burst out of his office, his hands raised in a gesture of absolute surrender. General Hale, sir, I am Captain Thorpe. I want to express my deepest, most profound apologies for— You have nothing I want to hear, Captain. Victor's voice cut through the room. It wasn't a yell. It was low, resonant, and carried the deadly calm of a man who was used to ordering airstrikes. Sir, we have already suspended Officer Lang. We are launching a full internal affairs investigation. Oak Creek Police Department is no longer investigating this matter, Victor stated, his eyes locking onto Thorpe's. Your department has proven it lacks the integrity to police itself. This is now a federal civil rights investigation. Victor gestured slightly with his left hand. The leading FBI agent stepped forward, flashing a federal warrant. Captain Thorpe, we are seizing all dash cam footage, body cam data, radio dispatch logs, and use of force reports related to Officer Derek Lang, the FBI agent said crisply. We are also seizing his locker, his personal vehicle, and his departmental emails. Nobody touches a single file in this building until we clear it. Thorpe swallowed hard, nodding rapidly. Of course. Whatever you need. Victor turned his gaze slowly across the bullpen. His eyes swept over the terrified faces of the officers until they locked onto the man sitting on the bench. Derek Lang shrank back against the wall. The cocky, aggressive predator who had stood over Marcus just hours ago was gone, replaced by a trembling coward. Victor walked slowly toward the bench. The heavy, rhythmic thud of his polished dress shoes on the floorboards sounded like a ticking clock. The military police flanked him, their hands resting on their sidearms. Victor stopped 2 feet from Derek. He looked down at the disgraced officer. He didn't see a cop. He saw an undisciplined, cowardly bully. You thought he was nobody, Victor said, his voice dropping to a terrifying, quiet register, meant only for Derek. You saw a young black man waiting for a bus, and you saw an opportunity to feed your own pathetic ego. You thought you had all the power. Derek opened his mouth to speak, to offer some pathetic excuse, but the look in the general's eyes silenced him instantly. It was a look that promised complete destruction. My son's heart stopped for 6 seconds tonight because of you, Victor said, the granite mask slipping for just a fraction of a second to reveal the agonizing pain of a father. 6 seconds. The silence in the bullpen was so absolute you could hear the fluorescent lights humming. I have spent 30 years neutralizing threats to this country, Victor continued, his voice returning to absolute ice. You are a threat to the citizens you are sworn to protect. You are a disgrace to the uniform you wear. I am not going to just take your badge, Mr. Lang. I am going to see you prosecuted to the absolute maximum extent of federal law. You will lose your pension. You will lose your freedom. When I am finished with you, you will be nothing. Victor didn't wait for a response. He didn't need one. He turned on his heel, his medals clinking softly against his chest, and walked back toward the precinct doors. Tear this precinct apart, Victor commanded the FBI agents as he passed them. Leave no stone unturned. As the heavy doors swung shut behind the general, the FBI agents moved in, locking down the building. Derek Lang sat on the bench, putting his head in his hands, finally realizing that his career, his freedom, and his life as he knew it were officially over. The karma hadn't just arrived, it had descended like a tactical missile. The rhythmic electronic beep of the halter monitor strapped to Marcus's chest was a constant, maddening reminder of the night his life fractured. In the time following the incident at the bus stop, Marcus sat by the large bay window in his family's heavily secured home on Fort Marshall, staring out at the frost-covered lawns. He was physically healing. The gash on his head had scarred over, and the burn marks from the taser prongs were fading to a dull purple. But the psychological wounds were raw and bleeding. He had always believed in the power of logic, the sanctity of words, and the protection of the law. Derek Lang had stripped all of that away in a matter of seconds, replacing it with the primal, terrifying realization that his intellect couldn't stop a bullet, nor could it reason with unchecked state-sanctioned malice. Downstairs, the house was a war room. Major General Victor Hale had effectively turned his ground floor study into a forward operating base. But Victor wasn't the only force of nature at work. His wife, Serena, had fully mobilized her extensive network. As the head of a massive philanthropic foundation, Serena possessed a Rolodex that made politicians sweat. She was systematically dismantling the Oak Creek Police Department's public relations spin machine, ensuring that Marcus's face, the face of a brilliant, law-abiding honor student, was plastered across every major news network in the country. The heavy oak doors of the study swung open, and Simone Kane strode in, shedding her wool trench coat. She looked exhausted, but fiercely triumphant, carrying a thick leather briefcase that seemed ready to burst. "Victor, Serena, gather round," Simone commanded, spreading a massive stack of manila folders across the mahogany dining table. Marcus, hearing his aunt's voice, slowly descended the stairs and joined his parents. "What do you have, Simone?" Victor asked, his voice low, his posture rigid. He hadn't slept more than a few hours a night since the incident. He was a man holding back a tidal wave of fury through sheer agonizing discipline. Simone looked up, a sharp, predatory smile playing on her lips. The FBI just finished their preliminary forensic analysis of Derek Lang's personal and departmental devices. We don't just have a civil rights violation, Victor. We have a systemic, premeditated pattern of racially motivated abuse. The man is a walking hate crime. Serena placed a comforting hand on Marcus's shoulder, pulling him close. "Show us," she said, her voice steel. Simone opened the first folder. Turner's deleted text messages. The Bureau's cyber division recovered all of them. He had a group chat with 3 other officers, all of whom have now been suspended pending federal indictment. The language they used to describe the citizens of Oak Creek's minority neighborhoods. Simone paused, her jaw tightening. It's vile, but more importantly, it establishes mens rea. He actively bragged about escalating stops with Black and Hispanic youth just to, and I quote, remind them who owns the streets. Victor's eyes darkened, turning to a flat, dangerous black. He admitted to it. In writing, Simone confirmed, but it gets better. Officer Cole Bennett, Lang's partner, the one who tried to stop him. Marcus spoke up quietly, his voice slightly raspy. Simone nodded at him. Yes, sweetheart. Bennett broke. The moment the FBI put him in an interrogation room and threatened him with accessory charges to a federal civil rights violation, he folded like a cheap lawn chair. He has officially turned state's evidence. He signed a sworn affidavit stating that you were fully compliant, that you posed zero threat, and that Lang explicitly ignored his warnings before deploying the taser. So, the feared for his life defense is dead, Serena stated, a cold satisfaction in her eyes. Buried, Simone agreed. We also pulled Lang's internal affairs file. 5 previous complaints for excessive force, all involving young men of color, all magically swept under the rug by Captain Thorpe and the police union. The DOJ isn't just coming for Lang anymore. They are filing a consent decree against the entire Oak Creek Police Department. They are going to tear that precinct down to the studs. Marcus looked at the stacks of paper, feeling a strange hollow sensation in his chest. Aunt Simone, is he going to prison? Simone stopped shuffling the papers. She walked over to Marcus, placing both hands gently on his cheeks, forcing him to look directly into her eyes. Marcus, listen to me, she said, her voice softer than usual, but vibrating with absolute certainty. Derek Lang tried to steal your dignity, and he almost stopped your heart. He thought he was untouchable, but he made the fatal mistake of pulling you into his darkness, not realizing he was dragging himself into the light. Yes, he is going to prison. I'm going to put him in a federal penitentiary for a very, very long time. I promise you. Victor stepped forward, placing a heavy, warm hand on the back of Marcus's neck. We don't just win battles, son. We ensure the enemy can never strike again. The trial begins soon, and we are going to dismantle him piece by piece inside the United States District Courthouse in Chicago. The air was suffocatingly tense. It was day 4 of the United States versus Derek Lang. In the front row sat General Hale in full dress uniform, an intimidating sentinel beside Serena. At the defense table, Derek Lang looked broken. The arrogant predator had been replaced by a pale, trembling coward, facing a 98% federal conviction rate. In a Hale, merry move, the defense put Derek on the stand. He played the victim, citing the shadows, the late hour, and Marcus's furtive movements. He squeezed out a rehearsed tear. I was terrified. I made a split-second choice to save my own life. Simone Kane stood up for cross-examination. She didn't use notes. She simply played Page's cell phone footage on the monitors, pausing it right as Marcus's hand emerged from his bag. Mr. Lang, look at the screen, Simone said, stepping closer. Do you see a weapon? Derek swallowed hard. No. Are his fingers splayed open, clearly demonstrating his hand is empty? It happened fast, Derek deflected, sweating profusely. It happened exactly the way he told you it would, Simone snapped, her voice filling the room with terrifying authority. You didn't tase him because you were afraid. You tased him because you were angry. Objection, the defense yelled. Overruled, the judge barked. Simone walked to her table and picked up a single sheet of paper. Let's talk about fear. This is a text message you sent 2 weeks prior to the incident. Next punk from the east side that gives me lip is riding the lightning. They need to learn to submit. The courtroom gasped. Riding the lightning is police slang for deploying a taser, is it not? Simone demanded. It was just a joke. Derek stammered wildly. Is it a joke that Marcus Hale's heart stopped? Simone leaned in close. You looked at a 17-year-old boy and decided to teach him a lesson about submission, but you picked a boy who doesn't know how to submit, and a family who knows exactly how to destroy a bully. Simone turned her back on him. No further questions. On the stand, Derek Lang finally shattered. The jury deliberated for barely 3 hours. When the verdict was read, there was no gasp, only the heavy weight of inevitability. Guilty on all counts. The judge didn't wait for a separate sentencing hearing. Mr. Lang, you weaponized your authority to terrorize a child based on your own pathetic prejudices. I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. As two massive federal marshals handcuffed Derek, he looked over his shoulder at Marcus. Marcus did not gloat. He simply offered a look of quiet, profound pity. Derek looked away, deeply ashamed, as he was dragged into the abyss. Later, the bright June sun shone on the manicured lawns of Oak Ridge High School. Major General Victor Hale, Serena, and Simone Kane sat proudly in the front row as the principal took the microphone. Please welcome our valedictorian, Marcus Hale. The crowd erupted into applause. Marcus stepped to the podium, taller and broader now. The physical scars had faded, but the internal changes had forged him into a resilient young man. He looked at his father, who offered a slow, respectful nod. 2 years ago, I believed that if you followed the rules, you would be protected, Marcus began, his voice echoing clearly. I learned the hard way that our system is deeply flawed and can be weaponized against the innocent. But I also learned something else. Marcus smiled fiercely. I learned that darkness cannot survive the light. True power doesn't come from a weapon or fear. It comes from truth, community, and demanding accountability. We are entering a broken world, but we are the generation that will fix it. Let's go change the world. The applause was thunderous. As Marcus held his diploma high, he knew Derek Lang had tried to steal his future, but had only given him the fire to illuminate it. The story of Marcus Hale is a powerful reflection on systemic abuse, accountability, and the unyielding strength of family. Derek Lang thought his badge made him untouchable, but he learned the hard way what happens when you mess with the wrong family. Karma kicked his door down with the full weight of the federal government. If this epic dose of justice made you cheer, hit that like button. Let me know in the comments what you thought was the most satisfying moment of the General's revenge. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another story where the bad guys get exactly what's coming to them. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.